Hello, hello, and welcome to Progressive West Texas, the show where we talk to people looking to make positive change in our community. I am your host, Cannon Roberts, also known as West Texas Progressive on TikTok and Instagram. We have not spoken since the election, and we took a couple of weeks off. I was only expected to take 1 week off, but then we had the Bands Off Our Bodies rally, and there was just a lot going on after that election week. And we were disappointed in the results. The biggest disappointment wasn't necessarily just the fact that Adam Hernandez lost the race for mayor, but the fact that he lost with only 12% of Lubbock voters coming out to vote. Like that was the sad part. And the fact that we get so many people who are so defeatist and who tell us there's nothing you can do, there's no way you can win. Basically, all of the political analysis you hear in this area is just who has the most money, they're going to win. Now, people couch that in other terms, but that's basically what they do. They assume people can buy their seats, and so far that is the way local elections work here in Lubbock. And so what happened was that the guy who won, Trey Payne, he won with 4% of the population in Lubbock supporting him. That was it. That is the big number that so many people think we cannot overcome. We cannot overcome the choices of 4% of the population. And that's not true. Like we can do better than that. And so we've already had meetings about what we're going to do different next time, how we're going to approach things, how we're going to empower and inspire people to turn out and vote. Because yes, I understand that looking at a campaign with tens of thousands of dollars, willing to raise and spend that much of his own money. This mayoral candidate, it was a lot of his own money. He put it into other PACs. Like there was all of these PACs that popped up that claimed to be grassroots organizations, but they weren't. Like when you look at the finances, they were all supported by this mayoral candidate and by one of the guys who is running for state house right now. And so he's in the primary runoff. And so all these groups were funded by these two guys, and they popped up and started spending money. And so with all that money he spent, with all that effort he put into it, he could only get 4% of the Lubbock population to show up for him. And so I think that says a lot. I think now we know it's not about changing minds. It's not about going and finding people who used to vote for the conservative or whatever and get them to vote for the more progressive candidate, or just the independent candidate. I really do think Adam Hernandez was independent. He was not partisan either way. And so it's not about it's not about changing people's minds. It's not about flipping people. It's just about getting people to go vote. It's just about getting more people to actually show up and go vote. And so, and then in the process of all this, I don't know that I've spoken about this on the show yet, but then the process of all this, I was getting attacked, and the show was getting attacked by a group run by one of Trey Payne's people. His campaign manager was the president of one of these PACs, and she decided that Progressive West Texas, not only did she keep calling it an organization and a PAC at one point, but she decided that I was the enemy. And so there were Facebook ads running against me personally, which was just odd. It was so weird. But frankly, I do think that also speaks to the low voter turnout. That people just look at that and they're like, why do we want to get involved in this mess? Why do we want to go and support someone who's going to run an ad like this? And it was interesting because she ran it for like 2 months on Facebook, and when I didn't care. I would try to avoid it. But every once in a while, somebody would tell me about comments they read, or I did come across it twice and look at some of the comments. Comments were mostly negative. Like there wasn't a lot of support from that kind of attack ad against a member of the community. But while people were willing to kind of make that comment there on social media, they're not willing to go that extra step to vote. And that's so sad because it's it's not that hard. Like, yes, Texas is making it harder and harder to go vote, but we know that there are plenty of people in our city with that don't have any barriers to voting. They could go out and they're choosing not to. But what that means is that in 2024, 4%. That's all we gotta do if we're looking at citywide elections. We just have to overcome 4% of the population. We have to get more than 4% out. That's very doable. That's very easy. And so even though it was frustrating, I do think this election also gives us hope, and it shows us what we need to do. And so, on that note, our guest this week is Joshua Shankles. He's become a good friend of mine over the last couple of years. He works with Lubbock Compact. That's how Adam Hernandez got his start. Nick Bergfeld was on the show a few weeks ago, and he released the disparity report that kind of launched Lubbock Compact. So Josh and I got to know each other when he was working with that. And now Josh is the West Texas political regional manager for the Democratic State Party here in Texas. And so Josh and I spent a lot of time just talking about what our area needs. And this conversation goes beyond just Lubbock, because we are two of the few people, in West Texas that have worked beyond just one county. Like, most people just work in one county because of whatever race they're running. But because of my work on congressional campaigns, and now Josh working for the state party, we know a big surrounding area. So we talk quite a bit about Scurry County, because they have some great people down in Snyder with Scurry County. So yeah. So let's not wait any longer. Let's go meet Joshua Shankles with the Texas Democratic Party. Hey, Josh, how are you?
Hi, Cannon.
So have you been able to recover since the election? We were both putting in lots of hours and we're exhausted.
Dude, it's funny because I've never been in this, but now my colleagues have, and so they were like, "Oh, you need to make sure to take your time after this." And so then, a couple of days in, after everybody really insisted that we do like some postmortems or whatever. I was like, man, everybody's going through the stages of grief right now where there's like denial and bargaining, like all the classic stages where everybody's just like, if we just woulda, if we just coulda, if this would have happened anyway. So yeah, I think I'm getting there. How about you?
Yeah, no, this week I was able to actually get some rest, because my the election was Tuesday, was not this past Tuesday, but the Tuesday before that. And I was like, okay, this weekend I'll be able to get some rest. And then but then I got brought into organizing the Bands of Our Bodies rally. And so then I started looking at my schedule. I was like, oh, I have a Planned Parenthood meeting on Thursday, and then we got to start working on this rally. And so that was last week. So yeah, I kept things stayed busy last week, but I think I am
Yeah,
getting a
dude.
little bit of a break.
It's so true. I mean, we're like jumping into things before we even get to some of the formalities of it. But we're all kind of in this position where things feel really urgent, and
Yeah.
it, like every kind of issue feels so urgent, and so you just like end up in this compelled mode to like keep acting and working, and it's very tiresome. So for you and for all of us
Yeah.
advocates out there, take time for number one. Uh, your mask goes on first.
Right.
Help yourself, and then
Right.
and care.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. And yeah, because I think when those, like with the Supreme Court with the leak, that gave us this sense of urgency. But I don't know, I don't know that that's really a true sense of urgency, because really, like, we have to wait until June until they actually release, the decision and all that. And so I do think sometimes when we feel urgency, it's not necessarily like it's not the reality of the situation, because the reality of the situation is we're going to have to spend the next year at least, or until November, probably the next 2 years, like doing a lot of work to fix this. So yeah, that urgency we feel in the moment can really really kind of weigh us down, because we want to get that stuff done. So yeah, I'm with you there, that you gotta find that balance. You gotta take care of yourself. I'm not always great at that, but I'm trying to do better. So
There's
well,
a Star Trek episode
yeah,
where they're like, something just happened, and they're like, should we leave orbit? And it's like, we don't know where we're going yet, so just chill. Anyway,
right.
we're not.
Yeah, we don't exactly know where we're going, but yeah, no, I like that analogy. Which Star Trek is that from?
That's the Next Generation, man.
Okay, okay.
Big Trek nerd here. Not
I
enough to have gone to a convention in a costume or anything, but it's like I could go toe to toe on some trivia. I don't know if that's embarrassing or cool.
I think that's fair. I just recently, like, I think it was last year, watched Next Generation, and it was good. Like, I kind of had this moment of like, okay, I guess I've been way too judgy. Like, the writing is good, the storytelling is interesting. So I moved on to the oh, which one is it? The one where they're out way far out there.
Deep
Uh,
Space.
Deep Space Nine. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I did move on to that one. It didn't quite intrigue me like Next Generation did, but it is a type of storytelling that I don't think we have on TV now. Like,
We were very hopeful in the 90s about the future. And we were
right?
like, everything's gonna be fine in the future. We're postmodern now. We've got it all
Right.
figured out. Had no idea what was coming for us.
Well, and even like, just on that topic, like, going back and rewatching like The West Wing, like, we were so hopeful. We were like, oh, things can be, so smooth or whatever. And I've been going back and watching it some, and like, I made a TikTok about it because I got so annoyed watching the episode where Rob Lowe goes and runs for Congress, because they're like, well, you're not going to win, but you're going to raise a lot of money, and you haven't been back there since you were 18, and just like everything was like, there's no way you can win, but we should still do it. And like, now that I have the perspective of being a community organizer, I'm watching it and I'm like, this is so dumb. You're just making the same mistakes, because they're never like, maybe we should try something new. Maybe, how about we have Will Bailey, who's in the, and I understand with the story arc of the TV show, they were setting it up so that Josh Molina could take Rob Lowe's place as an actor. But I was like, this is terrible. This is terrible grassroots organizing, y'all. And yeah, it's so but there was that sense of hope there that you do see in Next Generation, of like, yeah. And now all of our shows in the future are pretty dystopian, and all of our political shows are like Veep. So
Mhm.
it's very telling. Okay, well, now that we're a good chunk of the way into the show, uh let's
This can be the cold. This can be the cold open part.
yeah, that was the cold
People
open.
do that these days.
Sure, yeah. So so Josh, first tell me, what is your job title with the state party, and what's your role?
Hurt. Yeah. My name is yeah. So Josh Shankles, and my title within the Texas Democratic Party is West Texas Regional Political Manager.
Okay.
So basically, they have the state cut up into 5 big hunks that are somewhat regionally or politically or geographically unified. And there's a person with my job title and position that is, services that area.
Yeah.
And then the bigger counties in the state, they are handled by the my supervisor, the deputy political director. So none of us have a Harris County, a Tarrant County. That's all. Yeah, most of our efforts are devoted to all of the smaller counties. So
Yeah. And so what is your region? How far do you go?
oh, dude, they're all big. Texas is a big place. Any one of these regions in another state would be another state.
Right.
Um, and so you'd have probably a party infrastructure that's just what my supervisors look like, which is like a political director and a deputy political director.
Yeah.
So yeah, the boundaries of my territory are the upper boundaries of the Panhandle, and then that extends all the way down to like San Angelo, Tom Green County.
Yeah.
And it goes like one county over into the El Paso arm.
Okay.
And it's just kind of just a little nubbin. It's more like the county extends into the El Paso arm, and then one county past Wichita Falls.
Okay.
And so it's 80-ish altogether. And so yeah, a really big area and a lot of ground to cover. That's the largest geographic area of the 5, and the second smallest population.
Okay. Interesting. And so 80 counties. It covers 80 counties. Is that what you were saying? Okay.
It's like 83, 84. I forget the exact number.
Yeah, and for anyone, I don't know if we have a whole lot of viewers that are outside of Texas, but for anyone outside of Texas, if you're going from the North Panhandle down to that El Paso County, that's like 8-9 hours. Like you probably wouldn't do that since you're centrally located in Lubbock, but yeah, I think a lot of people don't realize. Even sometimes, I think people from like Dallas, Houston, Austin, they're like, no, we can go between those cities like just in a few hours. And so yeah, that is a rather large area. So how has it been? So you I know that you've been spending time going to these other, like, these rural counties, meeting the county chairs. How has that been going? Is that are you making good connections? Are you hopeful for what's happening in those counties?
Absolutely, yeah. So our roles are somewhat nebulous in nature, because the job is somewhat of a catch-all, that does a lot of different political work in between the interfacing between the state party apparatus and the county party apparatuses, which really, because of the statutory construction of the way Texas does its primaries, its elections, the counties drive a lot of the activity of the party and the political activity of the state in general. And so, and it's a huge area, and it has a lot of diverse needs and regions and geographies and economies and people and languages, and just, again, I need not tell. There's a hilarious meme about Texas that was like circling around on some of our internal threads, and it was like, Texas, this is how big Texas is. And so it had like the planet Earth inside of Texas, and another state of Texas inside of Texas, and then the whole universe inside of Texas. Anyway, yeah, so it has all these diverse things. And so what the opportunities might look like in Longview in East Texas are going to look a lot different than what they do in Lubbock. How active and stable is the county party there, and what are the voting demographics look like there, and what kind of opportunities are there, and what's been happening in the local news that are advantageous. And so that's a lot of what our role is, kind of like a shark, where we're just looking for blood and opportunity. Not in a, I hate to put it in a negative context, but it's a good analogy. Anyway,
Sure.
we're looking for those opportunities in our region
Right.
to strengthen county parties, expand party infrastructure, take advantage of political opportunities, keep apprised of the news, cultivate candidates, and so what we're doing individually or in our region is largely guided by what these county parties, what the candidates are look like, who are the activists, what are the organizations that are active, what are the ambitions of people out there, how does this fit into the context of electoral strategies for the state. So anyway, it's a very complicated sort of puzzle, and so that's really what a lot of our work is to do, is to figure that out. And so, to answer your question, what things look like in the region is also kind of broad. But I would be happy to report that there are active county parties, especially around the population centers, but not always entirely. There are some pioneers out there in some pretty remote areas, kind of hanging out a shingle and figuring out what to do. I've had so many positive, optimistic conversations. I just got done. Great example. I just got back from going to the Scurry County party meeting last week on Thursday, and that's oh my gosh, what city is that, Cannon? I do this
Snyder.
every single
Sorry, I
yeah,
didn't know what you were
Snyder.
looking
I
for.
do this
Yeah,
every
Snyder.
single time. It's like as soon as I try to think of it, it blanks out. Yeah, down in Snyder, and had like 15 people in the meeting. All of them obviously really enjoyed each other's company. They have a lot of ambition and goals. They have cultivated a really nice culture within that organization. And it was just so refreshing to see people approaching their work with like seriousness and optimism and just a good work ethic. And is tremendous. So there's a lot of good things going on in our region, as you know. And I think that things are heating up a little bit for progressive to take advantage of and maybe make some moves. I don't know what that would ultimately look like. And, you and I both know that if we're talking about flipping the region blue, well, that's a very long-term and ambiguous sort of no
Right.
that I would love to see.
Ambiguous. That's the problem. Yes. Yeah.
But if we're talking about getting progressive candidates elected, progressive policy being enacted, and making a difference in statewide races, I think we're on the cusp of progress there. Anyway.
Yeah. No, I really appreciate what you said about all that. I would say, like, so you're covering a bigger area than what I'm familiar with, because I'm familiar with the 27 counties of District 19, our congressional district. But out of those counties, my favorite county party was definitely Scurry County. And I like going down to Snyder, and I'm sure you met Ed Vinson. Like, he's a really great guy, really nice, always positive. And we need more of that, because like he's ready to work, he's ready to help, he's ready to jump in, he's ready to give advice. He is like, I've never heard him say, like, when you tell him someone's running, his first comment is never, well, they're never going to win. It's never going to work, which there's so many people out here that, like, they might donate to you, but they're going to tell you they're going to be negative first. And Ed is never that way, and he's really great. So no, shout out to the Scurry County Democrats, because they have a really great party. And I've been to some potlucks they've done, and it's just some fun stuff. They if you ever, like, if they ever have an event rather than just like the county party, they usually do it at this open area downtown. You know, I mean, in downtown Snyder is, you know, very very small, but it's this very cool kind of like park type area between a couple of their buildings downtown, and so yeah, that's my
Nice.
favorite one. So yeah, I had to jump in on congratulating and talking about Scurry County.
Yeah,
So
but I
yeah,
would
go ahead.
mention here, and I'll let you move on, but I would say also Howard County has a county judge candidate that
Okay.
he looks fantastic. He looks like a lot of people that we ourselves have kind of tried to. He reminds me a lot of insider conversation here. He reminds me a lot of Adam, frankly.
Oh, okay.
And so there are other good candidates out there like
Uh-huh.
that have a really good shot. So anyway, there's a lot of good things. Go on.
Yeah. Okay. So first, I'm tempted to pull that thread about the individual candidates, but before we do that, I do want to come back to that. But what I wanted to ask first is in terms of like the rural counties. So for a second, let's like just think about the counties and not necessarily the bigger cities. You know,
Yeah.
so Abilene, Lubbock, Midland, Odessa area. So just those rural counties are there are their needs the same or do you see every county being different?
Yeah, no, of course their needs are a lot different, and what I hear a lot from county representatives in especially very rural counties, there's kind of a same script, which is that it's kind of lonesome out here, and I don't find a lot of like-minded people where this is concerned,
Hmm.
and they hear a lot of ugly, bizarre rhetoric,
Sure.
of course, and they don't know quite what to do with that. And there's a lot of underground Democrats,
Hmm.
you know, that are seem to have feelings about uh, how public they'd want to be with their politics in their small towns, because to them it has very real consequences for their families, for their church organizations, for their employment, for their involvement in civic groups. And so it's a real challenge because of what has happened in the larger political zeitgeist and narrative, you know? And so they're having to own a bunch of trash and garbage and false narratives that has nothing to do with them at all.
Yeah.
And it really does impede the work of Democrats, of progressives, uh, of, of well-meaning people of all political stripe. It
Mhm.
it very much impedes the work of well-meaning conservatives that we might disagree with, but won't wreck the place. You know,
Right.
like,
Yeah.
so it's a very problematic and poisonous and toxic atmosphere that we're all of us dealing with, and that's certainly the case out in rural counties. County party chairs have a lot of different attitudes and personalities and coping mechanisms, and so some of them love being the weirdo in their town and are really hanging out a shingle, and
Mhm.
that's kind of part of their strategy in a way, and I think that's pretty savvy in insofar as psychology and tactics is it kind of lays in the same vein as like the come out sort of strategy that
Yeah.
was embraced by LGBTQIA people, which is just like if you're out and present, then that uh, starts to readjust the psychology of people that have to deal with you and interact with you a little bit. And so there are those types,
Yeah.
and then there are other types that are more reluctant. And so that's one thing that I think that folks like the Scurry County Democrats are being really smart about some of their public tactics is that they're taking the organization right now in a direction where they want to be seen as like do-gooders and really kind of uh, serious policy people,
Mm-hmm.
and kind of have a tongue-in-cheek sort of approach about their work, and are being non-confrontational about it,
Mm-hmm.
and all of that is kind of playing into what kind of reputation they want to have in Snyder.
Right.
And so I think that that's kind of smart that some smaller county and more rural county parties are looking at that from that perspective, and others kind of want to learn and talk about that sort of issue and kind of
Mm-hmm.
stake it out and start to think about it. So
Yeah. So
did I answer your question or did I just ramble for
no,
like
no,
10
no,
minutes?
no. You answered. You talked about I mean, because my question was, kind of what do the rural areas have in common? And so I really like what you're saying. Like one of the things that you keep emphasizing, Josh, is the fact that this is not a monolith, and people see Texas as a monolith, and we're
Right.
even saying no, West Texas is not a monolith, and so you have different strategies, you have you have different cultures in these different counties, and so yeah, I think a lot of people when they think of West Texas rural Republicans, what they're going to think of is like that MAGA crowd, and they're going to think of and that's not always the case. Like
Yeah.
that's not what we see, and even in Lubbock County, there's a big split there between those two. So I really like that you are talking about kind of what those differences are, and probably in those counties that have a big MAGA presence, that's probably one of the reasons Scurry County is trying to do the like, hey, we're focusing on policy, we want to do good, we want to be positive, but a county that doesn't have quite that big presence, like maybe like Bailey. People might disagree with me on that one. I'm not as familiar, but like Bailey County, where Muleshoe is, I think it's all much more like kind of we keep it quiet. Like we're not going to get in your face, and so those different strategies I think are really important. I think that gets missed a lot from just the conversation, political analysis, like these counties are different, and that's what happens between when you have such a massive space, when you have to drive when you have to drive 2 hours before you see another town or something, and I think a lot of times people that live in other parts of the country just they don't understand that. I remember the first time that I drove when I was in upstate New York. We drove from Binghamton down to our the printer. I was working on a literary journal, and we went to go see the printer for some reason. And so we were driving down into Pennsylvania, and I remember like we got like we left Binghamton. We were driving for about 30 minutes, and one of the people in the car was like, "Wow, we're in the middle of nowhere." And I was like, "What? We're in the middle. There's houses everywhere. Like there are people. Like, what do you mean we're in the middle of nowhere?" And they were like, "I don't know. There's probably not like a mall for another 15 miles." And I was like, "Again, what are you talking about?" I was like, we go hours only seeing cows. And so, but that separation creates different cultures. And I think, people don't always understand that. So kind of on the same subject, kind of, but I want to talk about the cities now. So Amarillo, Lubbock, Midland, Odessa, Abilene would probably be upset if I didn't include them. I'm assuming Abilene's also in your area. Yes. Okay. So we don't like being compared to one another. Like, Lubbock thinks of itself as the big city. We don't have to think about anybody else. And these other cities, we feel like are jealous of us or something. But at the same time, we're all centers of the surrounding rural areas. So do you see any commonalities, or is it kind of the same thing where each city has a very different culture and that changes the needs of each area?
No, I mean, I see more similarities and differences than in these population centers. You know, they have a, I mean, in a lot of it depends, of course, on what kind of thing you're talking about. You know, like uh, economically, they have, you know, of course, some very different considerations because like Amarillo and Lubbock are well, really most of these places are transportation and routing hubs and
Yeah.
have a lot of that going on. But of course, there's like some that are more heavy, uh, ag like grown agribusiness. Some are
Hmm.
like protein agribusiness. Others are oil and petroleum products. You
Right.
know, so there's that kind of dynamic. But in general, from a political standpoint, they're all low voter turnout. They're
Hmm.
all generally thought of as highly progressive, although I think that that is a very questionable assessment, given how low the voting turnout is. I think that we can't honestly know.
Right.
Uh, they, you know, yeah, I think they have a pretty similar
Yeah.
uh, dynamic. They might have different specific news or specific leadership that
Yeah.
you know, gives a certain dynamic. You know, Lubbock certainly has its own like what types of elements of corruption or news or perception or
Sure.
history or different things. So you know, surely that exists out there. But no, I see them as really pretty similar, and a lot of the strategies and tactics in the urban areas would probably be pretty similar.
Yeah.
And you
Yeah.
know, it's so the party has these strategic goals, and they're very classic. Although a lot of ways that they approach them are very innovative. I will say, you know, the state party apparatus takes a kind of a shotgun approach to tools and resources and communications and all this kind of thing because it is covering such a broad geographic area and population and needs, and so it takes this shotgun approach where it sends just tons of things down the pipes, and it's kind of up to counties and regions to sort of pick from that what is sort
Hmm.
of applicable or useful or whatever. Anyway, um and so all these strategic goals, to me, as somebody who, you know, I don't have a political science degree, as you well know. I'm
Hmm.
somewhat novice in this, but all of them are pretty classic, and you know, it's like uh, voter registration and get out the
Yeah.
vote, better collaborative strategies with coordinated campaigns, and yada yada yada. Anyway,
Right.
um, but like voter registration is a top priority for the state party.
Sure.
But as you well know, in Lubbock, we have really high voter registration already. They just don't go vote. And that's
Right.
pretty similar throughout all the urban areas in our
Okay.
region, is that they have very high voter turnout. They just don't go do it.
Right.
And so, what is the highest priority at the state level, especially where it applies to Dallas County, Tarrant County, Houston, you know,
Yeah.
Travis County, uh, is it, a much lower order of magnitude of importance in our region, you know.
Right.
And so voter registration drives in a place like Lubbock, in a place like Abilene, are an important thing to happen because of the way that our state really poorly manages this issue, and so it's necessary. But it our urban areas probably have a higher priority, and that's probably
Yeah.
efforts to connect with voters and get them out to the polls.
Yeah. Well, and that actually leads me to something that you brought up earlier that I wanted to talk about. So low voter turnout, it's killing us. Like that's, we I don't think I've talked about it on the show yet because I haven't done one since the election. But 12% of Lubbock's registered voters came out. Our new mayor Trey Payne, he won with only 4%, of the Lubbock population voting for him. That is, yeah, that's terrible low voter turnout. Like we got to get more out there. And so we are highly registered. People just don't show up to vote. You made the comment about like individual candidates versus turning West Texas blue, and I do think this broad idea of turning people into Democrats is something that keeps us from doing more. Because even looking at Lubbock County, and I haven't looked at the numbers in a while, but I know just a couple of years, I think it was 2020, there was about 1,000 more registered Republicans than Democrats in Lubbock County. That's it. Even though, most of our Republicans win with 70% of the vote, when you look at registered, they're right there. They're pretty equal. So I think the lesson we learned from that is that people just don't want to be like put in a box. Like they don't want to be given labels. And that is what is making them resistant. And so what do you think, what are the benefits of focusing on individual candidates? So you mentioned the judge down in Howard County. John Gatika is running for county commissioner here in Lubbock County. What's the difference between that approach of like focusing on the individual rather than thinking, rather than basically creating converts, if that makes sense?
Yeah, no, I mean, it does make a lot of sense. I'm not sure. It's an interesting sort of puzzle that we're in, because what a lot of the narrative is like about the sort of tribalism and division, and that is guiding our politics at the moment, right?
Yes.
And so there is a sort of element driving people into corners and really accentuating their signaling on picking up, because we saw this in our local race, is that our local race is nonpartisan, but people could give out and pick up the kind of signaling that would tell them like, oh, this is the Republican guy, even if he's not carrying that moniker next to his name.
Right.
And even though his opponent specifically was specifically trying to dissociate from a Democrat or a Republican handle. And, that trying to create that distance was likely enough for some amount of voters to be like, oh, well, he's a Democrat, even though he wasn't technically any. So, so I don't know. I mean, that is an element. And so, yeah, it would seem to be that in this kind of atmosphere and climate, the tactic to go against that would be to focus on the merits of the individual candidate. How far that can get it's got a lot of factors to it, obviously. But I think over time that's the sort of thing, like the thing that I've been wanting to look into. I don't know if you're that familiar with this. The thing that I've been wanting to look into lately, and especially getting this job, and especially since the race, is game theory. Are you familiar with game theory?
I know. Yeah, I know some game theory. I touched on it in grad school.
Yeah. No, I've only heard about this. I've met some people that get into this, especially in grad school. But it sort of places everything within the context of like moves and counter moves.
Sure.
And what you tend to end up in political races and political calculus and calculating what kind of messaging strategies and running role is, you end up in this sort of thing where like, what's the right move and what's the wrong move? And then if you lose or whatever, then you're like, oh, well, this was the wrong move and this was the right move. And I've been more interested in this framing where it's like, what is the best counter move to a move? And when one thing happens, what's the best next thing to happen? And that seems to be more about what game theory is. So anyway, going back to your question, yes, I think that focusing on the merits of the individual candidates has to have some kind of impact in this sort of tribalized sort of thing. And I do think that a lot of people are hungry for that sort of thing and
Mhm.
sick and find this whole noisy, complaining, fact free, whiny
Mhm.
narrative on either side of the political spectrum tiresome, and are actually hungry for somebody who is serious, who is not a complainer, who is inspiring, who, but can you connect with them in enough time? Will it take more time to get a engaged electorate before that type of thing is viable? I just don't know. We're testing out the
Yeah.
boundaries, you know?
Yeah. Well, and this might be our nerdiest show so far, between talking about Star Trek and West
Oh
Wing,
yeah.
game
Sorry.
theory. I'm going to talk a little bit about some post-structuralist theory too, but because because kind of what I've seen is, I think it comes down to kind of a difference between authority and influence. And if you focus on the individual candidate, they have to gain influence, and that it takes a while. Like, you got to build those personal relationships. I do think we saw Adam Hernandez do that. I do think, he got involved because he wanted to help create, like, help improve Lubbock as a community. He had no intention of running, originally. He just wanted to help, and he got out there and he helped, and he gained enough influence that people really, pushed him towards that. And so I think on the other side of that, you have the authority of the political parties. And
Mm.
that's why we join, you run either as a Republican or Democrat, so that you immediately have that authority. And people tend to push back on that overt authority in our area. However, when it gets really frustrating is with something like in this mayoral election. So even though people push back on that, they don't want to be considered Republican or Democrat, they want to be an independent voter. In the end, they voted for the mayor who seemed to have that authority backing him. That even though he wasn't running as a Republican, he seemed to have that authority. And we both know that a group that we assumed would support Adam, that they supported Trey and said, well, Adam doesn't have any experience, which neither does Trey Payne. Like nothing, nobody has experience as for being mayor except the people who have been mayor. And
Right.
so even though as a culture our area tends to push back on that authority, if they can disguise it, they'll support it. And so, so in the end, this group that we kind of thought was obviously going to support Adam went with the group that had authority, because maybe that authority will give them a little more power in the community. I I think that was their thinking. I think that's really what made that decision.
Yeah, perhaps, I take it that it is a classical political trope too, that like
Hmm.
uh identity trumps issues.
Right.
And so, if people identify with you, then that's going to outweigh an issue for
Hmm.
them,
Hmm.
and so there's a thing to wheedle against. And I would also add, and this is something that we talked about kind of in our post-mortem, is that there are a whole lot of different layers of what's going on with the electorate. Some of
Yeah.
it is voter apathy, just plain voter apathy. They don't it just doesn't register to them. They don't pay attention to it. And then there's a layer of disenfranchisement,
Hmm.
and a lot of that is historic, and a lot of it is direct. And there's some degree of it that people are like, I called the city about this stray animal issue and they never answer anything, so I'm not voting for any of these yahoos.
Right. Right.
And
Yeah.
then there's a layer of it that is frankly privilege, and it is, uh I don't have to worry about this issue. Things are going fine.
Yeah.
Whatever. Things are going fine enough. My vote doesn't matter anyway.
Yeah.
And cannot tell you the amount of college kids that were like, I just go to school here, you guys.
Right. Right.
And like anyway, bless their hearts. College kids are great. But anyway, so yeah, there's just like tons of different layers with the electorate, and each one of those has kind of a different solution and an amount of time that it takes to sort of work against it.
Yeah. And why do you think that this narrative that there is overwhelming support for the conservative side, like that is like everybody just takes that narrative. Everybody just, but again, like I was saying, only 4% of Lubbockites actually supported our mayor. Even if we go to the 2020 congressional election, which had record turnout, Jody got like a little over 200,000 votes. I don't remember what Tom had, but in the end, it was like about I think like about 300,000 people voted, and which is less than half of our congressional district. And so yes, Jody still won by like 70%. He did, like Miguel in 2018 cut into his percentage by quite a bit. Tom cut into it a little bit more, just like 2 or 3 more points on top of that. What Miguel, after Miguel's big jump. But in the end, it's still fewer than half of our congressional district that's actually just turning out to vote in the first place. So why is it so hard for us to overcome this narrative of just like there's nothing we can do about it? Because if we were having even 80% voter turnout, then I'd be like, okay, maybe that's true. But we're not. Like we're hitting record numbers when we have like 30% turnout, and people are like, yep, 70% of us can't do anything else, So
yeah,
What do you think?
dude, I mean, here's another thing with like so many layers. It's some of it is history, some of it is who's empowered in certain positions, who's making the narrative, the larger uneven playing field, the incongruent playing field that progressives and conservatives have in the media space. Again, thank you for doing in this area. A lot of that, I guess, probably plays into it. And there's just there's the too many, especially media personalities in conservative spheres, are willing to lie, to cook up baloney, to there's a lot in Lubbock. There's a lot of small, not nationally known personalities that have quite a bit of reach, and so they're able to kind of sculpt a narrative out there. A lot of the loudest voices on social media platforms are conservative people, and so it all kind of like plays into this zeitgeist about what the town is. When like so many of these people, I mean, are phony baloney conservatives.
Sure.
There's nothing even conservative about them. There's nothing conservative at all about the degree of corporate welfare and sort of cheating and cronyism that we see between business and local government. There's nothing, think about the word conservative. It has conserve right at the front of it, and these people are so, if you cast something in the lane of environmental policy, they're immediately kind of like worked up and like, oh, You know, one guy at one of the mayor's debates was like, a food desert, that sounds like socialism to me. And so they're just so keyed up with kind of baloney.
Right.
Some people, some loud people, some empowered people. But it's not even true conservative. And so
Right.
conservatism is unmoored from any sort of basis. What its basis is what influencers think they can leap on to take advantage and
Right.
gain power. That's what it's moored to. It's moored to whatever is advantageous to gain power, and that often has a very cynical, nefarious, dark,
Right.
problematic slant to it these days.
Yeah.
It's very unfortunate.
It's like every conservative who runs in Lubbock, like every mayor, city council member, like they do not question how the city is subsidizing the growth that's happening south of town. Like they just assume that if you're conservative, you're going to support that, and that's not actually a conservative. Like that goes against it. Like conservative would say, no, we're going to take part of the town. You get to take the risk. You get to build that area. Then once you have established it, then we'll consider taking you on. That would actually be the conservative approach, rather than saying, okay, we will basically guarantee, that the success of your new neighborhoods, and we will do it by ruining the neighborhoods we already have. Yeah, that's definitely not that's not a conservative approach. So
Yeah,
I think, yeah, I think that's a good point. I think the fact that I think this narrative exists because conservative has no meaning, and so they can constantly change it. So whoever's making the loudest noise, they can be like, "Yep, that's conservative. That's us. We're the one." So yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. So yeah. Well,
yeah.
Josh, this has been a really good conversation. I really appreciate you being on. I do want to ask you. I got two questions I'm going to ask you. I forgot at the beginning, but I always ask people, what's their favorite thing about Lubbock or West Texas? And you, like a lot of us, left and you came back, and so I'm always interested in hearing what people have to say, who've moved back. What do you like about Lubbock and West Texas?
I have found, seeing bizarre folks out here that I have met in any of the places that I've been. And I think part of that is, especially for, progressives and sort of artsy, outside of the norm people, supposedly, for our region. I think it's kind of like born out of necessity. And so in coming back, it's nice to see that element that I remember from my youth, from my childhood, is alive and well and expanded. And in fact, in coming back, I've run into and been engaged in the most hopeful and optimistic things of my life. So I've been glad to be back. I certainly appreciate having met you. The work that you do, the work that we've done together has been, just a tremendous joy. And
Sorry for that abrupt ending. Josh was in Oklahoma as we were recording, and so he started kind of losing his internet there at the end, and we couldn't really hear him. So I just kind of had to cut it when we could hear him and leave it there. But I appreciate you joining us this week, and I will see you next week.